The first movie we're talking about today is Pitch Perfect. April Fools. Not really. And if you're watching this after April Fools, psych. Let's go ahead and talk about mind game horror movies. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor. I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and downright notorious modern horror films. If you're new, I recommend you go check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll give you a good idea of what we do at the Horror Movie Syllabus. But in short, we take a subgenre of horror and we look at 3 movies from that subgenre. Today, the subgenre we're looking at is mind games, and that's a little bit of a weird subgenre to explain. In fact, for those of you who have looked at the syllabus, you might have been kind of wondering, well, what exactly do you mean by mind games? So I'm going to try to explain, but it's going to be a little bit difficult because for me, it's kind of like I know it when I see it. In short, mind game horror films for me are movies where the movie is playing a mind game with one of the characters, usually the main character, and or they're playing a mind game on the audience. And the examples that I'm going to show you today should make it kind of clear what I'm talking about. At least that's my hope. I'm hoping that by showing the 3 movies that we're talking about today, you'll get an idea or a vibe for what can qualify as a mind game movie. Now, if we're being honest, there's a lot of movies that could arguably be slid into this category. So what I'm trying to do is pick movies where the mind game itself seems to be a central piece or a central conceit of the movie or a major memorable plot point in the movie. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go through it. Now, as usual, I've divided these movies into levels: undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate levels. And in this case, it's going to be the level of intensity of the movies, going from least intense to the most intense. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump right in. The first movie we're going to talk about today, the undergraduate level selection, it's April Fool's Day. Now, April Fool's Day came out in 1986, and it's a pretty notorious film, but we'll get into that in just a second. If you're not familiar with April Fool's Day, it's a slasher film that basically starts with a bunch of friends going to an island for their friend's birthday party. She's a wealthy girl, and then they start getting picked off one by one. And that's all I can really say about the movie. I don't want to spoil it any. But we do have to kind of talk about the fact that it has a controversial ending. And that's why the movie's so notorious. So the title of the movie might be a little bit of a clue as to how things are going to go. It's also worth noting, though, that the title of the movie comes at a time when slasher films are really tying it to a holiday theme that begins, of course, with Halloween and Black Christmas, and carries on to this day, for that matter. But the movie has a twist to it that is jarring and controversial, in that a lot of people really hate this movie because of the twist, and a lot of people love this movie because of the twist. I fall somewhere in the middle. I actually do enjoy the movie a little bit, but I'm not sure how I feel about the twist. In part because the twist, you've heard me talk about this before on the channel, that I don't like when movies lie to the audience in order to preserve a twist. It tells you things that doesn't make any sense, or characters act in a way that only makes sense if you're trying to fool the audience, because otherwise they're by themselves, and why are they acting that way? This movie kind of does that, and I don't like that too much, but I guess because this movie is just your typical slasher movie, I can kind of roll with it a little bit. It doesn't derail the movie for me. But the movie defies logic. It doesn't really stand to reason. And if you're that guy, if you're that person who needs that movie to add up and make sense, this movie's going to be a problem. Again, I'm not trying to spoil the movie. I'm kind of talking around the twist, but I'm kind of giving you enough information that if you're so inclined, you might be able to kind of piece it together anyways. But it is kind of important to talk about because it's part of why the movie makes the list. Like a big part of the twist is the fact that it's a mind game both on characters in the movie and on the audience. And so that's why I've selected it here. The mind game is what makes this movie notorious. Makes it noteworthy and stand out from so many other slashers of the era that come and go and are forgotten about. April Fool's Day has stood the test of time and been remembered because of the mind game aspect of it. It's the only memorable part of the movie. Otherwise, it's just a standard slasher flick that is not a particularly bad one, but not a particularly amazing one either. The kills are fine. The characters are fine. Everything about it is fine. It's competent, and if you like slash movies like I do, it's a good time. But the mind game aspect to it is the part that makes it worth talking about 30 plus years later. So that's why it's here. The fact that it is endured did lead it to get a remake. The movie doesn't really have much of anything to do with the original. Doesn't have any of the interesting mind game stuff really. It's a fine slasher. It's just forgettable. It's not particularly bad. I know a lot of people talk about how bad the remake is. It's not bad. It's just forgettable, which in some ways is a little bit worse. A bad movie can at least be fun and memorable. This movie is just it just lays there. It's a waste of your time, if I'm being honest with you. But the original is not, if no other reason than to see how you react to the mind games, how you react to the plot and the illogical aspect of the plot. If you haven't seen it, please give it a chance and then come and leave a comment and let us know how you reacted to that, because I think it'd be fun to see how people experience this. And it's not a big enough movie that people are doing reactions to it on YouTube or anything like that. At least I haven't seen that so far. So I'd be curious to see how people react to this. So leave a comment if you're reacting to it. If you have seen it and you have an opinion on it, please share that too, because like I said, I'm a little middle of the road, and I lean towards I like the movie and I like the twist ending and stuff. I definitely don't hate it, and I don't have the strong reaction that some people have to it. So I'm kind of curious to see if you have a strong reaction one way or the other. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it and why you feel the way you feel. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and let us know. And if you have seen it, let us know what you thought of it. The next movie on our list, our graduate level movie, is Kill List. Now, I'll tell you the truth. Kill List was a late change to the syllabus. I just added it pretty recently, and that's because I just finally got around to seeing the movie. It came out in 2011, and it's basically about a hitman who's been out of work for a while, goes back to do a job, and then things kind of go sideways. And that's all I can say about that, because again, there's mind games going on here, and the whole movie is a mind game on this lead character, and ultimately a mind game on the audience. So the thing about Kill List is it's got a bit of a reputation amongst some horror aficionados as being a really crazy, surprising movie, and it's a fair reputation. I want to put that on the record. The fact that people think this movie goes crazy and is really surprising and shocking is accurate. That is true, and there's a lot of extreme violence on there, and there's some crazy stuff and some really rough stuff in this movie that happens. All of that is true. That said, the reason why it was a debate about putting it on the syllabus is because for me, this movie did not live up to the reputation. I'd heard about this movie for a while, but I hadn't gotten around to seeing it. Just hadn't, because the to do list gets a little long. But I finally got around to watching it, and the first 30 to 45 minutes of this movie for me was a bit of a slog. It's a lot about the family drama, and this particular guy, this hitman who is dealing with his own issues and baggage, and he's out of work and stuff. And it took a long time for this movie to get going for me. And I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't for the fact that I knew this movie was going to go to some really crazy places, I might have wanted to tap out, because it didn't feel like it was coming together. It didn't feel like it was going anywhere. And I didn't find the characters all that likable, to be honest with you. In fact, I kind of found them a little dislikable. I didn't really enjoy seeing them fight and bicker, and the dialogue didn't have enough snappy patter or whatever. And there's some weird editing cuts and stuff. So it really kind of felt almost dreamlike, which honestly, by the end of the movie, makes more sense. But when you're kind of going through the first half hour, 45 minutes, I'll be honest with you, if I didn't know anything about this movie, I'd have been like, this is a waste of my time. But then it picks up. The hitman and his buddy start to go on a job, and from there things get a lot more interesting and a lot more taboo, and there's a lot of violence that is really graphic. And so at that point, you can get more into it. But it spends a lot of goodwill getting there, man. And so I wanted to make you guys aware of that, that it takes a little while to get there. But I ultimately decided to go ahead and put it on the syllabus because it does deliver. It just takes a while to get there, but it does deliver. And by the end of the movie, the mind game is complete, both on the protagonist of the film and on you. I'm gonna warn you right now: if you want this movie to deliver you answers, if you want there to be an explanation, a satisfying ending, a psycho style enumeration of the events and what has happened, you are not going to get that, and you're going to leave dissatisfied. But if you want to be smacked upside the head like what happens in this movie to some of the people in it, and just kind of manhandled for a little while, and taken on a bizarre ride, shaken to your core, and then just left there in a dazed stupor, then check this movie out because that's basically what it does to you, and that's the mind game for it. The mind game on the protagonist is evidence as it's going on. You start to see somebody's playing with them, something's going on, and then at the end you see how it's all shaking out. But for us, the audience, that whole long, lengthy beginning kind of starts to make a little bit of sense. It all, I don't want to say comes together because I don't know that it really does. I don't know that I felt satisfied with this movie, but I get it. I get why it's got the reputation that it has. It is a bit of a rough watch. I don't want to spoil things for people, but there's violence to people that is shocking and upsetting. And if you got anything about, kids and whatnot, maybe Kill List is the one to pass on. But it is a surprising movie because it does feel like it shifts genres at some point too. That's the whole thing. The first part of the movie feels like a drama, maybe a hitman movie, but it doesn't feel like a horror movie for the most part. And it shifts gears kind of strangely, not very smoothly either. So again, this movie's not going to be for everybody. I'm not even 100% sure it's for me. I'm a little torn on it, but it's got enough of a following and it's got enough notoriety that I felt like I wanted to talk about it more than just as an extra credit film. So I slid it into the syllabus and I'm talking to you about it here. Am I recommending it? Maybe. Again, if you got a bit of a strong constitution and you kind of want to be taken for a bizarre ride that maybe doesn't pay off, go for it. And let me know what you think of it. But otherwise, if you feel like you need a little bit more explanation in your horror movies, or if you don't like extra sensitive stuff, then maybe take a pass on it. But if you have seen it, let us know what you think about it because I'm still kind of trying to formulate my opinion on this. It's been a while now, and I still don't exactly know how I feel about this movie. So that in and of itself is, I think, noteworthy. If a movie sticks with you and it's still making you question it, way later, that's a sign of a movie that has some impact. So I'll at least give it that. It's an impactful film. So check it out if you're so inclined, and if you have seen it, let us know what you thought of it and give us your thoughts. Thanks. And the last movie that I'm going to talk about today, our postgraduate level movie, is Compliance. Compliance came out in 2012, and as I mentioned previously, these movies are ordered in a level of intensity, and Kill List is a pretty intense movie by the end of it. Compliance, arguably less intense if you're talking about on screen violence and things like that. Where Compliance gets the edge for me in terms of intensity is that it's based on a true story. Now, I realize that the based on a true story trope is a notoriously tired trope that many horror films use, from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to the Blair Witch Project. Um, Lots of movies have tried to say they're based on true stories and they stretch the truth quite a bit. Compliance is really based on a true story. I did some of the research after the movie, and the movie is a intense and disturbing, deeply disturbing ride. The research I did on the true story after the movie was maybe more disturbing because the stuff in this movie that happens that you would believe has got to be a fabrication for the sake of the movie. It's got to be just trying to add extra layers of creepiness and unsettlingness and inappropriateness are actually true. So if you're not familiar with Compliance, and it's not the most well-known movie, the movie is about a girl who works at a fast food joint, and somebody calls in claiming to be a police officer and accusing her of a crime and asking the manager to hold her captive, if you will, until he can get there and keep her distracted while he searches her place for evidence of the crime, and then keeps asking the manager and the other employees to do things to this employee to torture her, psychologically torture her. And it is profoundly disturbing what happens to this girl and the things that these people do because they think they're being told to do it by somebody in authority. And that they're afraid something bad's going to happen to them if they don't do it. It's profound. It shook me to my core, man. I watched this movie with only the vaguest idea of what it was about, and it rattled me, especially knowing that it's true. Like it really deeply, deeply disturbed me when I found out how much of this is actually accurate. The vast majority of the movie is very accurate. Mostly the difference is they make it look like one incident happening to like one person when these things actually happen to multiple people. This was like a prank or whatever that was done to multiple people. It was like an epidemic happening for a little while. But I'll let you guys delve into the true story aspect of it. Do the research on your own. Just look at Wikipedia. It has a ton of information there. Because it'll spoil the film. I don't want to get too into it, but shocking, shocking the things that happen, and you feel for this woman and the things that are happening to her, especially in this post Me Too world where we are all a lot more cognizant about the mistreatment of women and the sexual harassment issues and stuff like that. This movie should make your skin crawl. It should be really, really profoundly upsetting to you. And it's very, very effective as a result. This movie hits so hard, at least for me, just in terms of just creeping me out and infuriating me, just make me so mad, both at the person perpetuating the crime and for the people being roped into it. And like, can't you figure this out? Don't you know any better? It's just so upsetting in the best way, in terms of being a very powerful and effective horror film. Very, very, very strong. Also helps that the performances are excellent. In particular, Dreama Walker, who plays the lead, and she's done some sitcom work and stuff like that, but she is absolutely incredible here. Gives an incredibly brave and powerful performance, and I tip my hat to her because this is not an easy role to take on, and she does gangbusters with it. Also stars Ann Dowd, who we've seen in other movies, and she is always good. Suffice to say, the movie has incredible acting, a fantastic premise, a really tight script, and is really well directed. It's just so like white knuckle frustrating to watch this movie. I can't say this is a fun experience. It's not a movie that I've gone back to, but I remember it really well. It hit really well, and it left a lasting impression. It's the kind of movie that I don't know that I'd say it's an important movie, but it kind of feels a little bit important because it has a reflection of like the terrible things that people get put through. But in reality, you know, it, I don't think it comes off as an exploitation film. Let me be clear. I don't think it's like exploitative at all. I think it's really more taking on a really disturbing subject matter and doing it in a way that doesn't shy away or flinch from it, and that can be a tough watch. So I guess I would say I recommend it to the strong, thick-skinned horror fan, or people that really want to confront this kind of stuff, this kind of behavior going on, because I think that it'll give you a kind of a feeling of what it might be like to be put in a situation kind of like that, or to be put at that disadvantage or objectified in that way. It might be something that somebody like me, it would be like the closest you can really get to even understanding something like that, maybe, and which is not even to be as close at all, but at least give you some sort of empathy. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm making more out of it than it really is. Maybe I'm overblowing it, and if I am, let me know if you've seen it and you think that I'm kind of making this a bigger deal than it really is. Then let's have a discussion about that in the comments. I'd like to hear that because I might be wrong. I can fully admit this, but I'm just saying it, for me, it really had a profound effect on me, more than Kill List, which again, Kill List goes in some nuts places, gets really, really intense, some really crazy stuff, and yet I find Compliance to be the more disturbing of the two, the more intense of the two, at least for me. And again, partly because it's real, and partly because the subject matter is just so depressingly rough and frustrating. So I know I haven't made it sound like a great movie to watch, and in some ways it's not, but I do think it's an excellent movie. It's across the board well made and really, really powerful. It stuck with me. So that's Compliance for you. Make up your mind whether or not you want to watch, and if you do, let us know what you think. But Compliance, man, that one, yeah, that one really hit for me. So that's going to do it for our mind games today. But I'm going to bring up a few extra credit movies that I think you might enjoy. The first one we're going to talk about is Cam, and Cam came out pretty recently. I think it might have been a streaming original, maybe a Shutter original or Netflix original. I don't really remember. And Cam was one that was getting some buzz on social media. I'd heard people talking about Cam and it being really good, so I sat down to check it out one night, and really, really good. The movie, in short, is about a cam girl, a girl who does like internet strip shows and stuff like that on live streams for people for money. Um, and she starts having this experience where somebody's trying to take over her account. And I don't want to say too much more than that because it goes into some really surprising and interesting ways. And I really liked it. It felt kind of like a fresh take on maybe a tired subject of kind of like being stalked and somebody messing with you, but with some ways that kind of was like unclear. Is it supernatural? Is it technological? Is it just somebody messing with her? Um, and I really liked that ambiguity for the movie. I also really like the lead actress whose name escapes me off the top of my head, but she's excellent. She's a big part of why the movie works because she's playing a cam model, so she's got to have a certain sex appeal to her, but she also has this wonderful girl next door charm and likability that really endears you to her so that you're on the journey with her. You're rooting for her and you're in her shoes, even though her lifestyle might not be something that uh, you know, you can easily identify with. She does feel very down to earth to you and you can relate to her. And that makes the movie a really good ride. The mind game in this movie is a real trip. It's a really good one. Again, it's another one where there's a mind game being played on the protagonist, but in a way, a mind game also gets played on the audience. And that's, to me, a really good example of a mind game movie. It's one of the reasons I've picked the movies I have is a lot of the times that's what's happening. And that's a good double whammy for you. That's a really good, satisfying movie for me. Cam was a surprise. It was a revelation. It got a lot of buzz when it came out. And it seems like that's kind of died down. So I don't know if it has the legs to be a true cult classic or not, but it's definitely something you should check out if you haven't seen. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's a fun ride. It's a good example of a mind game and a really fun, fresh take on horror. The next extra credit movie we're going to talk about is Cube. And Cube is a pretty well known cult classic amongst horror fans. And a lot of you probably are bummed right now because if I'm mentioning it here, it means it didn't make the horror movie syllabus proper. And I'm kind of with you. Cube was something that kind of kept squeaking its way onto the syllabus and then getting bumped off because I really like Cube. And it's a movie that can kind of get squeezed into a couple different places, but it just always kept getting edged out by other movies. And I wanted to talk about it at some point in time, so I put it here because of the fact that I could call it a mind game. Because again, mind games are being played on the people in the movie, and also by extension, kind of getting played by us, the audience, because we don't know what's going on. If you haven't seen Cube, it's very similar to Saw, and Saw kind of owes it a bit of a debt, I think, because I think Cube came out first. But it's a bunch of people who are trapped and have to navigate like these deathly puzzles and traps. But unlike Saw, which seems to kind of revel in this dreary, grimy, gross, morbid torture porn aesthetic, Cube has like this kind of almost futuristic sci-fi, brightly lit, cool looking aesthetic that I kind of liked more. And Cube, at the time that it came out, it felt really fresh and interesting and original. And the kills were very shocking and graphic and really, really cool. Uh, Post Saw and all the torture porn genre and all of the substitutes and copycats, Cube loses a little bit of its cachet and a little bit of its originality. If you're going backwards and seeing Cube after seeing a lot of these other movies, it may not have the same effect. If you saw Cube when it came out, I think it lands a lot more effectively than if you see it now, having gone through a lot of a lot of the other movies that kind of deal with torture and kills like this. So that's another reason why Cube kind of kept slipping off the syllabus, is that the longevity of it hasn't aged it as well. But I do think as its own movie, in its own vacuum, it does actually hold up. I do still think it's a good movie. It's got some fun characters. It's got some really fun kills. It's got a really cool aesthetic. If you haven't seen it, I'd say give it a chance. Give it a watch. Um, I don't want to over blow it and kind of build up your expectations too much about it because again, it hasn't stood the test of time. A lot of other movies have come and done the same kind of things, but it really is one of the earliest examples of this kind of movie and one of the better examples of this kind of movie. So I definitely think it's worth a mention and worth a view. And the last movie that I'm going to bring up today is Shutter Island. And Shutter Island is arguably not a horror movie, but I think a lot of the reason why people say it's not a horror movie is because it's directed by Martin Scorsese and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo and Michelle Williams, and it's got this A-list pedigree to it, and it's kind of got almost like a prestige type background, and critics looked at it more like not a horror movie, or like horror movies can't have that kind of background, which is nonsense, by the way. And Shutter Island winds up being a horror movie. It's really more than anything. It's a mystery movie, and I do have a mystery subgenre, and I could have put it there too. But I'm putting it here because of the mind game being a crux of the movie, and B one of the things that elevates this movie to being just a standard mystery. So if you haven't seen it, I won't tell you too much because again, it's a mystery. But Leo plays a investigator, a cop who goes to investigate a missing person who's gone missing from an asylum, and that's all we'll say about it. The mystery unfolds, and it's pretty compelling, and the way it ends is really really interesting, and it's all part of the mind game motif. But I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it's got a poignancy to it in terms of the mind game that makes this movie kind of heartbreaking and not just a pulpy noir mystery. It succeeds as a pulpy noir mystery, and I like that stuff. I love that stuff. And that so Shutter Island was already a win for me almost from the get go because it's my kind of movie. But the ending and the mind game aspect of it lend itself to something that just gave it just more poignancy. That's the word I keep coming to. Poignant. It really, I felt it more. It had some heart to it and a bittersweetness to it that I really, really appreciated, and gave it the kind of thing that makes what people talk about it later on. I mean, yeah, it's got DiCaprio. It's a Scorsese film. That's great, but there are other Scorsese movies that are forgettable. This movie could have been one of those. It's a good Scorsese movie, whatever. But that ending is what has made people talk about it for years to come. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it very much. I really like this movie. It's much less scary than the other movies we talk about in the horror movie syllabus, but it does have some disturbing aspects to it. So be aware of that. The mystery unfolds in ways, and the revelations in there can be a little on the disturbing side. So be aware of that. It's not necessarily one for the kids, but it's a good mystery. It's a good movie. It's very well made, of course. Scorsese. It's very well acted, of course. DiCaprio and Ruffalo and Williams. But if you haven't seen it, do check it out. And if you have seen it, let me know what you think. Did you like it as much as I do, or is it forgettable to you? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. So that's going to do it for today's video. I really hope you guys do take some time to go down to the comments and tell me what you think of these mind game movies or other mind game movies that I've missed. As I said, other mind game movies will pop up in other subgenres because there are mind games in so many kinds of horror movies. Off the top of my head, Funny Games is a really good example of a mind game movie that is going to show up elsewhere in the horror movie syllabus. But if there are other movies that you're thinking might have qualified for this list and I didn't put it in here, by all means, mention them in the comments below because I really enjoy some of the suggestions you guys have been giving us, and I think other people are starting to enjoy those suggestions as well. So if you have comments to add suggesting other movies, please do so. We've been enjoying the comments, and we're all starting to kind of build that little community of sharing our horror knowledge and our horror love with each other. So thank you guys very much for the participation in the comments. Thank you for attending this video. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share these movies with you and express why I like them so much. I hope that you check some of them out if you haven't before. With that, we're going to call it a day. I appreciate everything. Thank you very much. Class dismissed.